But without further
Absolutely.
ado, let's get into the star of the show, which is this box right here in front of me. This is what we're here to talk about. This is the Matrox Maevex. Hardware encoders, decoders. It is a great appliance that really addresses some of the dealer opportunities and some of the things that our dealers are running into. And we're going to talk all about that today. But Ron, before we do, I would love for you to give a brief introduction of who you are, what you do at Matrox, and why we invited you on today's show.
Well, obviously it's my good looks. Uh, no, I'm been with Matrox for 25 years. So I've worked with the company through multiple generations of products, and I started out in distribution sales, got into channel sales, working with a channel, and then getting even in for 2 years I was U.S. government sales manager, so dealing with a lot of military accounts and business. So I learned a lot about how to sell, and then also a lot about the products themselves. And so right now, I'm the Maevex business development manager for the Maevex product line of encoders and decoders.
Excellent. And I'm guessing you're a baseball fan as well.
I am. I am. We're a little short on baseball here in Montreal since the Expos left, but
Right.
I guess the Blue Jays are our next best team, or the Nationals, since that's where the Expos went at one point.
Right? And the reason I bring that up is because we're going to take the full classic approach and
Yeah.
talk about the star of our lineup, which is the Matrox Maevex, and we're
Yep.
going to run down, kind of in a fun and creative way, all of the different sales opportunities and the top reasons that our dealers have to sell these products. So first, let's introduce the product itself. The Matrox Maevex 6100 series is what we're going to refer into today. There are two
Mhm.
versions of the appliance itself. The 6120, which is a dual 4K encoded for $3,000 MSRP, or the 6150, which is the quad 4K for a $4,500 MSRP. Ron, why don't you give us a little introduction on that 6100 series?
Sure. Like you said, we have two versions of the encoder. One's a dual and one's a quad, and the top resolution they can do is 4K, but of
Okay.
course they can do everything below that. It's really an AV product, so it recognizes all of the standard computer resolutions, no problem whatsoever. And then additionally, we have a card version, which is used a lot less. The appliances are the one that's used the most, but often on the card side, we get specialized solutions or specialized opportunities that typically run their batch, if you will. So they're not the run rate product, but it's usually connected to project business. And then finally, we're introducing the 6152 decoder, which is a quad 4K decoder that we'll talk about as well.
Great. And I think that's why a lot of our dealers who know the Matrox name know that about your products is we're talking enterprise level products that
Absolutely.
are really built for specific applications and applications that can fit across several different markets. Ron, why
Yeah.
don't we talk about some of those different verticals and sales opportunities that our dealers might run into?
Yeah, I absolutely. I mean, it's a key element, right? To know where to hunt. And I
Sure.
think for the Mavic 6100 series, where we've seen it's been out for about 3 years with the encoders, and the decoder, just like I said, is being introduced. But where we see the most adhesion to the product is definitely in the military. All levels of the services, all the prime contractors, and everything in between. There's something about the product. I've seen a core in the military, in the Navy. It seems to fit in navies just because of form factor, and we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Control rooms, certainly in the military as well, but also utilities, oil, gas, transportation, effectively both in the control room to move data to, display walls and that sort of thing, and also getting data to the control room. So, one of those is NOC and SOC. So, network operation centers, security operation centers, we see that in the same environment related to control rooms.
Okay.
Digital signage as well. So we have the 5100 series. That's where we started. It's really distribution of digital signage. When you have many screens being the same, why use all the players and have all those moving parts when you can just stream the content that's in the same to all the screens? Process control and medical are two other important verticals and markets that we address with the products.
And that's great to see too, because I know the medical market and the technology being invested in is
Yeah.
just growing leaps and bounds, especially now within the pandemic response and everything happening in the current events of the world today.
Yeah, and it's an easy thing too because we see where we see in medical, it's often around the OR. So
Sure.
getting data out of the OR to somewhere else to share with potentially someone in the hospital or even outside of the hospital, or even for education purposes. Instead of that, you remember from when you're a kid watching TV, the round view with all the students looking down in the operating room. Well, now you can do all that with a bunch of screens and see cameras of the operation, all the ancillary data that's around the operation and the details of whatever it is, the life support systems and so on, from just the transmission of the encoded streams.
Absolutely. So before we get into some of the top selling features and opportunities, why don't we get into some of the nitty gritty detail and really introduce these devices to our dealers?
Sure. I'm not going to go into super detail, but I think everybody likes to, when you see the I/O of something, you kind of understand the product. So the first one there on the left, on the bottom, is the 6150, and then the 6120 just has dual connectors instead. But the key element on that product is that it has 4K HDMI in, and then it has zero latency pass-through for each and every output, whether it's quad or dual. That's really important because now you can intercept the desktop, and the operator of that desktop, he doesn't notice a thing, and we haven't touched the system. That's key for military. And then you have the audio, both digital audio on the HDMI and analog audio for each of the inputs, and you can choose which one you want, and you can mix and match with the video. So you can mix and match that with the product. Then finally, I won't go into too much more detail, but you notice those two network connectors on there. That's so
Yes.
you can separate your control data and have that on a user network, and you can have your video data where you want to keep it on a VLAN and so on, completely separate. So two IP addresses, two separate networks to make sure that you're not interrupting user functionality.
That's great, and I would suggest that another one of those enterprise features that
Yeah.
Matrox puts so much thought and engineering into. Just even separating those networks is something that's music to our dealers' ears and anyone who's run into network issues when they're out on a commercial install.
Absolutely. You do not want to piss off the users. They get mad and they call IT.
Absolutely. That's the last thing we want to do. And here we just have some of those overview features talking about the different resolutions that the Maevex is capable of, as well as the scaling and
Yeah.
compositing, if you want to speak a little bit more to that.
Yeah, I mean, these devices are very powerful in terms of their encode and decode capability. So we can encode or decode up to four 4K P30s, but we can also, instead of doing that, we can do eight 1080p 60s, full HDs, or
Okay.
16 1080p 30s. Now, I only have four inputs, but you might want to do multiple things with those inputs. So that's why I make note of that you can do so much more than just the four inputs. And then, of course, you can scale in on the encoder, scale out on the decoder, and you can also composite on the encoders or the decoders. So you have all that functionality built into the core power envelope of the products.